This video is going to be about my thoughts on the S&P 500 following the Donald Trump election win. I put 6% of my portfolio into the S&P 500 back in December of 2023. I also did a video on it, which I called All Hell New Keynesian Economics. And I named it that because I predicted a no landing. And at that time, this was my kind of rough guesstimate of what I thought would happen. But instead, we've actually gone tearing away with a incredible performance since December of 2023. I'm about 30% up. So that poses me the challenging question, do I buy in some more as I was planning to, up to a 10% holding in my portfolio? Or as we've done so well, should I just quit while I'm ahead and leave things as they are? Before I continue, please remember that I do these videos just for fun as a hobby and always speak to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decision. So I've decided that I will actually top up to the 10% so that 10% of my portfolio will be the S&P 500. And the reason is that I'm extremely bullish the US and the S&P 500 moving forward. And I'm going to explain why in a few slides. But first of all, what helps me make this decision is I've calculated that my extra top up now is going to be quite small because of how well that 6% I put in initially is done. And so overall, I'll end up with a average buying price down here. So moving forward, I have actually got quite a lot of leeway for a couple of downturns. I'll still be at a good price position. In my initial video, I highlighted how, as monetary policy has progressed, we've seen the gradient at which the S&P 500 increases step up, initially following the financial crisis around 2008, and again following the Wuhan outbreak. Ever since the great financial crisis, we've been in full new Keynesian economics mode. Now, this blue line here, that's represented here as the lower blue line, and that's actually a 16% yield per year following this long-term trend of the increase in the S&P 500, which is kind of coordinated with lots of excess money supply and money printing. So my expectations are actually that we're going to carry along at this kind of a 16% gradient. But there may be some kind of transition errors, which I'll go into shortly, which could like send it down. But actually, a 25% drop could be a kind of misstep that could happen, which at the time would have everyone screaming and running around, but actually in a longer time frame wouldn't be that much of a big deal. So the reason why I'm so bullish, and actually a lot of this, although I thought it'd be fun to call this video Trump Pump, actually regardless of if it had been the Democrats in or Trump, a lot of the same trends and future plans are set in place anyway, are set in motion regardless of who's in charge. The first is the US is the number one hydrocarbon exporter. So hydrocarbons are the most efficient way of storing, transferring, and using power. And so just by being the number one hydrocarbon exporter, that on its own is a massive boost for the US. And there's a lot that the US can do with that money that's generated from that situation. So just that on its own makes me bullish about the US and negative about backward situations like, for example, the European Union. Number two is the US has the best companies in the world. If you look at the stocks that make up the S&P 500, it's got the brightest and the best. These are all the cutting edge technology companies which are able to generate revenues all around the world because they're just better than anything anyone's got in leading technology. And so this in itself makes me just generally positive. Plus, these companies are actually going to be in the middle in the revolution that's going to be taking place in the world economy over the next few decades. Third is inflation. I think that certain things like, for example, trade wars and tariffs, but then also big government spending plans that will be required to help bring along some of the transition in the economy that's going to be required. This will be inflationary, and of course, inflation, as long as it doesn't reach a certain breaking point, is going to be great for the S&P 500. Also, there's more capitalism, and so Trump's quite clear that they're going to reduce the size of government and distribute money from the state to individuals, which obviously is a lot more efficient and then will generate a lot more GDP. And so that's another reason to be bullish about the S&P 500. And finally, modernizing the economy. Now, Biden had already actually started some of this with his so-called Inflation Reduction Act that was actually going to be inflationary. But Trump's going to continue these policies of reshoring advanced manufacturing to the US. And a lot of that is going to be enabled by the advances in AI and robotics. So there's going to be a lot of modernizing the economy, which I think is very bullish. Now, I'll go into a bit more detail into that in a moment. There are some bearish factors which I'll have to keep an eye on. The first is transition risks. So some of these things, for example, trade wars that could erupt, that could lead to short-term falls and corrections in the S&P 500. And like I said before, though, you could get like some kind of trade war leading to a 25% downturn, but actually in the long run, it would still kind of be in trend for my long-term investing purposes anyway. And then a big risk I see is the possibility of China invading Taiwan. That's something that if you're invested in the S&P 500, you've got to kind of regularly keep an eye on what's going on there using whatever channels you can. That, if it happened, would be a severe negative for the S&P 500. So all of this shifting of the economy and these bullish factors, where is this leading to? And this is perhaps going a bit off piste for this video, but I think I'll just quickly cover it. What's going on in the US economy? Actually, regardless of whoever is in power, I think a lot of this was going to happen anyway. It's all about the use of AI and robotics to replace the use of cheap labor, whether that's cheap labor within your own country or using offshore factories to exploit other people's cheap labor. The introduction of AI and robotics is going to eliminate this eventually. It will perhaps gradually over a long period of time, but it will eliminate this labor. And actually, we kind of have labor shortages, funnily enough, alleviates that issue as well. So I think that with modern technology, that's where we're going to. And it leads to for the US, it will lead to a place where the US has an advanced manufacturing economy and they can manufacture their chips and they can manufacture cars and all kinds of whatever other latest technological advancements need to be manufactured at scale. And because the AI and robotics enable them to do it in a cost effective way, whereas before they had to rely on other countries where that entered geopolitical risks. So what should happen is we'll still be importing primary commodities. Lower manufacturing will actually, that could still go offshore to countries in Africa, Europe, India, etc. But what would happen is, because this would be low tech, anyone can do it. And so you'd get like these components. So think of tires for cars, or nails, plastic bags. This low tech manufacturing can happen abroad. And then because they're all competing with each other, they're traded effectively as commodities. So we have as inputs the primary commodities and low cost commoditized low tech manufacturing goods, which essentially become as cheap as primary commodities because of the fact that anyone can do it, and so there's competition, resulting in cheap goods for America. Stuff that's harder to manufacture, America will be doing all that themselves, avoiding the geopolitical risks of trusting adversary countries to do it, because with the use of AI and robotics, the cost of production could be greatly reduced. And the expectation is that then there'll be a shift of the uh, the the population of the US from manufacturing and agricultural jobs, which will be ever more handled by robotics and AI, to the service sector. Depending on what government you have, you've got things like modern monetary theory to consider. And there's things like the universal basic income. This actually opens up a whole rabbit hole, which, to be honest, I think I should just do in a future video. This gives you kind of a general idea of what kind of transition is in the works. I think that all of the investment that's going to be going on to get there will be actually very bullish for the S&P 500, particularly in the context that a lot of the S&P 500 companies are at the center of that revolution. So that completes my video. I'm very happy to have 10% of my portfolio in the S&P 500 at a great average entry price, which can ride a few storms along the way. And for me, this will be a very good long-term holding. Once more, please remember this video is for entertainment purposes only, and good luck with your own investing. I do videos like this one just for fun as a hobby. It's for entertainment purposes only. Always consult a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decision.